Hey everybody, it's Betsy from Story Drawing Skills. As you may know, I saw this video called You Should Make a Webcomic by Super Death Show, and it made me decide that I needed to make a webcomic. So I decided to make 100 panels of webcomic from scratch in 6 months from July to December 2017. Yeah, I failed. So now I'm persevering and I'm just altering my goal a little bit to finish a webcomic. And maybe not in the 6 months, but maybe while I'm working my 2 part-time jobs and hopefully finish by the end of 2018. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the need versus the want. It's also called Kill Your Darlings, Killing Your Darlings in the writing world. And while I'm talking, I'll be showing what I drew for the panels, I think panel number 21 through 27 or so. And this is where the girls are going over to the rift and checking it out in closer detail. And this is in Photoshop where I arrange my panels and do some of the finishing touches like dialogue and stuff like that. And speaking of dialogue, here's the first case of something that I wanted versus something the story needed. You're going to see me type different text, like, I don't know, a billion times while I'm doing these speech balloons, because at first I wanted to start giving the readers some character background on the 3 of them. And so I was adding, or trying to add, something to introduce that Clarice is only on this team basically because she's broke. Her family, in my mind, her family was once wealthy, and so she's super used to being just waited on and having everything done for her. And then for whatever reason, I don't know, an uncle gambled it all away or something, I don't know. So her whole goal in life is just trying to get back to the standard of living that she's used to. And I thought it would be funny if it was just like her wanting to get married to a rich guy, like as soon as possible, just being a gold digger. And I don't know if that's actually funny, but you know, at the time I thought it was amusing. And so I was trying to just force this conversation to reveal that, you know, she wanted a man around, or she wanted like a potential husband, or, you know, she wanted to be a wife. And it didn't fit in what was happening right now. I felt like it was really being forced, and that's one of the complaints that I usually have about reading comics, especially comics that just jump around too much. And I like my comics to go very flowy, okay? I like to do it like a movie, or do it like just very logically. And when I was looking at how this dialogue was going, and how it was going from like, oh, how did we get stuck with her, and just trying to force it into, how come there's no men for me to marry here, it was like, just, it was really awkward. And so I ended up giving up on that, because even though, you know, I personally wanted to delve into the little character backstory right here, it just wasn't very good for the story flow and, you know, as a whole. So I ended up cutting all of that conversation and just really focusing on, okay, really the audience and the readers, they don't even know what's going on too well at this point. So even if I just stuck to the focus of, okay, it's their job to fix these little tears in the magic, I don't even know how to describe it, right? But there's some kind of imbalance in the magic, and they have to balance it. Like, that's basically what the reader's getting introduced to. So I don't think they're going to get bored by not knowing these characters' backstories at this point, that I can just go ahead and go with the main storyline of, okay, objective, we need to find this thing and we need to repair it. So then I went back and, yeah, just had to do what's best for the story. So here I am just setting up the word balloons, and you can also see that I gave up on hand outlining the speech balloons, and now I'm just using one of Photoshop's filters. And that was both because it just didn't make sense for me to have to hand draw every single balloon, and also it wasn't very consistent when I was hand drawing them, because I never really took down the measurements of my brush at the time or anything like that. It was just way too much time into a detail that wasn't good for the story. Like, what's good for the story is that it gets out and finished by 2018, not that it has hand-drawn speech balloons. So that's another case of me just learning, where do I put in my time, my ever so precious time and effort? Is it in the speech balloons, you know what I mean? Or is it in drawing another panel? So sometimes, even though I want a certain look for my panels or my pages, I'm starting to understand that it's not important. And especially, I've been reading more webtoons myself and just kind of observing what I find important when I'm reading. And really, it's just clarity, because I'm usually reading fairly fast. I'm a pretty fast reader. And I'm also just being aware of anything that stops me from really getting immersed in the story. And sometimes it's a technical thing, like, oh, they did, the 180-degree rule. They broke it, and the character that was on the right is now on the left, and that just jars me, But most people aren't going to notice that. And the other thing that really slows me down, ugly fonts, of course. That's a huge rant that is not going to be discussed in this video. But I mean, just those kind of things that it's like, even though the artist may really like that font, for the story and for an audience to consume your comic, clarity, it needs to be clear and it needs to be good for the story. And so that's what I had to do here with all this dialogue. That there she is, still talking about Clarice being a gold digger. And then I had to also try to force it back to, okay, now back to the objective at hand to fix this tear. Yeah, it's not going well. At the end of these series of panels, I had originally planned out that the little rock guys that are laying around on the ground there were going to, combine their powers Voltron style and become a giant rock monster. And way back in the earliest videos, maybe one or two, I was talking about how I really wanted them to be blasted off again, Team Rocket style, so that in the title introduction page I could show that they weren't really great at what they're supposed to be doing at their jobs here. And in my mind, I can see it so clearly, and I love it so much. And I think I'm finally realizing that it's just not good for the story, because as my sister was pointing out, if the current fight is these three against a giant rock monster and they go blasting off again, and in the original script I have it that another team just comes through and finishes off the rock monster and we don't even see them. It just takes care of itself off screen. And as a reader, she said that's really frustrating. She wants to either see this rock guy go down, or she wants to see the girls come back and try again. She says she felt really cheated out of seeing how this problem gets resolved. So then I thought, oh dear, well, if they don't go blasting off again, I don't have any chance to kind of explain the details of what the Trium report is about, and it just started me on this whole rabbit hole spiral downward of, I've got to change this entire story again. And this is probably my third or fourth pass at changing the story, because I keep finding these hiccups, or I keep finding things that I want to change. So now I may have to take a break from drawing and go all the way back to story beats again. And I kind of have a feeling of what I want it to be, because if you just think about some of your favorite shows, I feel like if this were an anime or something, we would get to the part where we see the rock monster and that they're in trouble, and then we might get a screen that says, oh, 2 weeks earlier, and then we would go backwards a bit and find out how they got to the situation. I find that happens a lot in fiction, in novels, that it's a writing device called Start with Chapter 2, where you get somebody in and interested and hooked on the car chase, or the action scene or the explosion or whatever. Then you back up and you explain why that's happening, or how it came to that. So that's the technique I'm going to be using for my comic as well. And in some really badly hand-lettered sound effects, I'm trying to make the sound of the rock monsters, all the little guys, all coming together. And so I went with like a taka taka taka, you know, I mean, like what sound does a rock make when it hits another rock? I don't know. But anyway, that's what I drew in that session, and that's what the kind of like little lesson that I learned this time is that you have to really weigh your wants versus your needs. And what does your story need? Probably not the things that you want, at least not all the time. So just be aware of that in your own stories, and where are your friends or, you know, whoever you're sharing your work with, where do they say like, oh, this doesn't make sense, or I don't get it, or I don't know why this is happening. And you got to really be honest with yourself and figure out if it's just something you wanted in your story or if your story really needs it. So that's it for this time. Hopefully I'll keep up with the weekly videos. I didn't actually get a chance to draw this week, so it was helpful that I had this leftover footage. But yeah, that's it. Until next time, happy drawing!